Today's podcast is brought to you in part by Real Marketing, the only marketing firm recommended exclusively by the Institute. Real Marketing utilizes over 25 years of expertise, and their products are built and customized for you to dominate any neighborhood, anywhere. Go to realmarketing4u.com. That's real marketing, the number 4, u.com. Also, look for past A State of Mind episodes with CEO David Collins as our guest. I'm here again today with my co-host, Jack Miller, who's with Parks Real Estate in the greater Nashville market in Middle Tennessee. And Jack has specialized in luxury homes and relocation services for almost 25 years. Hi, Jack.
Hi, Tami. How are you?
I'm great.
Well, good deal. Well, listen, today's a very special day because, as you mentioned, we're welcoming a guest to our show, Sharon Simms. And, of course, our listeners may recognize that name because, incidentally, Sharon is Tami's mom. And Sharon's been a full-time real estate professional in Florida for 37 years. She's one of the founding members of the Institute. She holds a CLHMS designation and guild recognition and a whole laundry list of other designations and certifications she's earned along the way. We thought it would be interesting to have you here today, Sharon, and hear how things have evolved in the industry during your tenure and what you think what the future might hold. So welcome to the program.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Jack and Tami.
So let's just jump right into it, if we may. So Sharon, probably one of the largest changes, the biggest changes you've seen in the industry was when we introduced the internet as a tool for real estate. Talk to us about, before the internet, talk to us about the book.
The infamous book. Ours was about an inch and a half thick, I think. And but if you're talking history, let's go back before the book. When I started, they would mimeograph half sheets and pass them out to all the agents, and we would put them in a book, in a notebook. So it was quite the progression when it went to the MLS book. And I kept all of those because I'm a hoarder. So, well, I haven't kept them now, but I mean, at the time, because you never know what you wanted to go back into. So we had just shelves of it.
Yeah, when we started, again, as Tami mentioned, I started 25 years ago. And when we started, the internet was in its infancy, particularly where real estate was concerned. And I'm still with the same company, but when we first started, my business partner and I, we go to a sales meeting, and our book was much the way you described it. We would go to the sales meeting, and agents would talk about things they had sold. And when something went pending, you'd hear this, this uniform rip as everybody pulled the sheet out of their book. They throw it down the table, and they pass out a stack of sheets of new listings or pre-punch, 3-hole punch, and we stick them in the book. And so, but it was so funny because after attending, we were new. We wanted to make sure we followed the proper protocol, and then after 3 or 4 sales meetings, I asked my business partner, I said, why are we carrying around this big book? We have an internet. We can just log on and look at it. But the agents who were there, like you, were so comfortable with the book. It was almost like a security blanket to have it real and in front of you, because I think a lot of us weren't really sure the internet was going to stick.
Absolutely.
Well, talking technology, when my first company was Merrill Lynch, which dates me a bit, and I wanted to fax something. And so I was after my office manager to get a fax machine. And he looked at me like I was an alien. And he said, but there's one in Clearwater. What do you want one here for? So I bought my own.
Yes, and back in those days, we had to put like a stack of books on your fax when you would receive one to keep it flat.
Right.
Because it would roll up on you.
And, that makes me think in both of those instances, something that we take for granted now is the ability to go back and look for something historically, right? When was this last listed? What's the sales history? And we think nothing of it. But if you didn't hold on to those paper scraps, that faded, right? The mimeographs and then the thermal heat from the faxes. Even if you did keep it, you go back a couple of years later and it's just blank paper,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
just something that we take for granted in that saving perspective. So I remember, Sharon, when I came to work for you, which of course was more than a decade after you started, photos were an interesting thing. You'd take pictures of the listing, you'd get the film developed, right, crossing your fingers that it was going to come out, and then you'd go to the drugstore and you'd have copies made, right, like 25 copies, 30 copies, and we would stick them, paste them with a glue stick onto the brochure paper, and that was our sophisticated print marketing materials at that time.
Even
But
even worse, Tim, we were also using real photography, and you'd get your photos back, and you look at the photo and go, "Oh man, we left a trash can in the background.
right,
It was too late."
exactly.
It
Yeah.
was not Photoshop. It was just,
Yeah.
can we cut that piece of the photo off and stick it
Literally.
here?
Yes. But I remember when we'd have an offer, the both agents would go to the seller's home and you would present it in person. And of course, you'd have to bring, I don't know, at least 6 or 8 copies of everything because the seller would sign and he'd want to keep a copy. You need to take his back to the buyer for them to sign. And it was quite a hassle.
It
Looking
sure
back.
Mm-hmm.
was.
And the counteroffer process, I think, was also entertaining, for lack of a better word, because if you got into a negotiation that went on for several days, by the time you got to the end of it, you look at your contract, there'd be so many scribble marks on there, and so
Yes.
many words written in margins. You would hope that an
Right.
attorney could actually review the final copy and
Yeah.
know what to do with it in terms of
Right.
what did it actually, what did it actually mean. Um,
Absolutely.
so Sharon, I'm just curious. So you've seen it. You've seen the transition from these live in-person presentations and presenting offers where you're meeting face to face with the other broker. How do you think the industry has changed? How's that dynamic different today when we're, digitally signing documents and sending them to our clients and digitally or taking those documents and sending them via email or text messaging to other agents? What's your thoughts on that?
Since the seller is the one that's most affected because everybody always descended on the seller, when we went back to the buyer with the counter, we would just be with the buyer. So I think that it helps the current situation helps the relationship between the seller and the seller's agent because you don't have, and I mean, we can all think of, agents we've dealt with in the past that we might not want sitting down with our sellers. So, and I remember the times that, if they were going to talk about it that night, it'd be, well, can you go sit on the dock? Sure. So I think it helps the relationship between the sellers,
So that
between
we
the
don't have,
seller and their agent.
when we don't have that pressure of everybody being all in the same room. That's an interesting perspective. I expected you to answer in probably the opposite way.
So did I. That's it. It is very interesting perspective. Well, for one thing, I know again when we started, we were still meeting with the agents with the hard copy with the paper. Now we did in our market, we didn't present. Although we had the right to present the offer to the seller with both parties there, as far as the buyer broker and the listing
Right.
broker. Well, I never saw that happen in practice, and they would tell us oftentimes that you had the right as a buyer broker to be there when the offer was presented, but no one ever acted on that. So that's news for me to hear that. Well, one of the things that I've seen personally it's I think it's kind of unfortunate. I think particularly with agents who have only experienced the market we're in currently, where everything is done digitally, they've never lived in a world where we met with the other agent face to face and then met with our clients face to face. And even though it's much more efficient now, I think a lot of times having that conversation with the other agent, uh, a lot of times the message was a lot cleaner and the message, the communication was a lot more honest. I think when it is not just as it relates to real estate, but in general, when people get behind a keyboard and not talking face to face with somebody, they don't think about the way they're packaging the message.
Yeah,
Exactly.
interpretation.
Yeah, so it seems, I don't know, it just seems to me, and of course, now at this juncture, I've spent more of my career with the digital side than I have, as you did, Sharon, when it was the face to face. But what I saw happen was, I think agents became a little more antagonistic when they were behind a keyboard. It seemed to be, so a lot of times the message was a little more aggressive, less friendly, less negotiation happening, and more posturing.
Mm,
That's
Yes,
just an observation I've seen. I don't know.
yeah.
I
You
think
know,
that's true.
and that makes me think about something that's so important. Um, Change took a long time early on, and now it happens at lightning speed. And it is so easy to get so blindered by just what's going on around you to not see what's coming next, right? And then there's not an understanding. So something that I inherited from Sharon from day one was the importance of education and staying on top of the market, right? Think about how those early things were happening, and remember that it was supposed to be the end of the real estate agent, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Right. My
Yep.
joke is when Al Gore invented the internet, right? That was supposed to be the end of
Right.
us. Some of you who are listening will get that, and some of you will think I've gone a little bonkers. But talk about, Sharon, what you think is important in terms of attending conferences and learning opportunities and taking classes and that kind of learning side of things as opposed to just working in your business.
Oh, I think that's critical. Absolutely critical. And I would not only would I advocate taking lots of courses and pursuing specialties and designations, but I would advocate take them out of your market.
Mm.
Yes, it's easy to go home at night. Yes, it's less expensive, but you miss the interaction because if everybody is local, they're not going to say the same things, in discussions that they are if it's from people from all over the country. And you're also building a great referral network. I mean, there are people that we've been exchanging referrals for 30 years. And
Tammy, Tammy and I've talked about that too, how critical that we've actually talked this very same topic before, how critical it is to develop those relationships in other markets. And not even interrupt you, Sharon. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, that's fine. And I think the same. It's easier and less expensive to take a course online, but you miss everything of that interaction with your colleagues. And I
One of
think
the
that's
things,
critical.
it is. One of the things I've noticed, Sharon, too, is that for me, Nashville, our market has evolved dramatically during my time in real estate over the last 25 years. I used to think of our town as a town. And now I think of Nashville as we're more of a player on the national level than we were obviously 25 years ago, much more so. One of the things for me personally was going to conferences and interacting with folks from larger markets than where we are. The larger markets seem to always, in my opinion, set the trend for what's happening across the country. And here's an example. When I first got in real estate, we talked about the photography and using your camera and having it printed out. It seems like we did this, okay? And
Right.
then it was a big deal. We had digital cameras and used the digital. We'd all have our own camera, not a phone, not a camera phone, but we had a camera. We go shoot the
Right.
digital camera, and that was a big deal. We're doing all in photography, and again, everybody around me was all doing their own photography. My business partner Robert and I started to interview brokers in other markets, larger markets, and we weren't attending conferences at that time because we didn't realize that was a thing, honestly. But we would reach out to agents in larger markets and ask them what they were doing, and we noticed how terrific their listings were looking, particularly the luxury listings. That's what we're all about here. How terrific their properties looked online. And so the common thread we heard from all these different brokers was they were all using professional photography. Now, it's interesting because we started adopting that very quickly in our market, and we only adopted it for certain level price point houses initially. And agents thought it was crazy that we were spending our personal money to get a professional photographer. And to put that in perspective, today you can get some of the best photographers in our market can shoot a luxury home, and it might be $300 or $400 perhaps in our market. to shoot a home, just the still photos, to shoot a home that's 10,000 square feet or more for $400. We were paying 20 something years ago, we were paying $1,000
Mm-hmm.
to get professional photography because there were no home photographers. We're going out and getting photographers who shot entertainment shots, for the music industry, or professional sports photographers to come in and shoot houses. Nobody did that sort of thing in our market. So the point being, we learned that from agents who are in larger markets that we would never had known had we not had that type of interaction. So that's really interesting. You should point that out, Sharon.
Well, another thing, I remember that, and before we were using the professional photographers, we felt we were kind of top of the line as far as realtors and shots that they took. And I remember one time when we had the professional photographer, we had Tami taking pictures the same time from the same location. So you've got the same light, the same everything. And the difference in looking at ours and the professionals was astounding. So we would use those two sets when we talk to sellers of saying, this is why it makes a difference.
Well, and it used to be a selling tool, to your point. We used to use that as a selling tool on a listing appointment and say, what we would do would pull up. I had a laptop and I would carry it with me, and it weighed a ton, by the way.
Right. I was just thinking it weighed about 1,000 pounds.
So it had a big giant leather case. We carried it in, and I would open up my laptop and I would show what listings looked like online. I would say, here's what your listing will look like with a typical brokerage in our market. Here's what our listings look like using professional photography. There was lots of oohs and ahs. Well, today, if I made that I know people would laugh at me if I made that comment in listing appointment now, because everybody uses professional photography. Even if you can find a $250,000 condo somewhere, it's got professional photography, if there is such a thing. So, but that was a trend. That was a change we've seen during your tenure.
Yeah. And talking about the cameras, that makes me think about, I've followed Sharon's career closely for this whole time. And she was quick to realize that technology was going to be a thing, right? When we thought that everybody else was saying this is going to pass. So Sharon got her first web page, I should say, because it was a single static page in 1986, right? Like serious dial-up action. And everybody thought that she was crazy, right? Because she was spending money, and it cost a lot of money then as well, to your point. But then she found it so important to be an early adopter of technology. But I do remember she always wanted to be on the cutting edge, not the bleeding edge. And so she got involved in different groups of realtors nationwide that were actually making money using technology, not just buying the newest shiny thing. And I've got to give some props. In 2008, right when that craziness was happening, Sharon was named one of the 100 most influential women in real estate and one of the top 10 female bloggers in the industry, right? Oh. And so she was all over, paying attention to what was coming, getting the latest digital camera if it worked, right? And those sorts of things, beta testing products. And so I'm curious, Sharon, what do you think was the biggest game changer? And what could you absolutely not live without today?
The internet, obviously. What our phones do today. I mean, you know that as soon as a new iPhone comes out, I have it. You've woken up at 3 a.m. when we're somewhere because I have to order that. But I think the amount of knowledge that we carry with us in an iPhone, whether you type in or whether you just ask Siri, is mind-boggling comparing to where it always used to be.
When the internet as a platform was introduced to all industries, one of the first things people started saying in our business, I was hearing when I started real estate. I hope you enjoy it because real estate's going away with the internet. The public won't need us any longer. We've already seen it pretty much eradicate the travel agencies. We used to all have travel agents. Well, people do it online now. We saw the travel agency business pretty much go away as I was going into real estate. And so people were forecasting gloom and doom for for our industry as well. But what it's done is it's helped everybody, the consumer, it's helped us, buyers, sellers, everybody I think has benefited. And one of the things I heard a very wise person say 25 years ago, as long as we hold the keys, because you don't want strangers walking through your house. You want somebody, guarding the castle. And so literally in in the luxury market that we all work in, there is some degree of truth to that. We're pretty much the guardians of the castle. So it's been a great boon to our business, and not the threat that some people perceived it to be years ago, I think.
That's a great
But
point.
I think it's not just the keys. It's because people can get so much information so easily on anything they want to look at. But the information is facts. What they're looking for is the interpretation of that. What does this mean? What am I not looking for? So I think, the advisory role
That's right.
has significantly increased
Well, and
instead of
often,
just being
yeah, the other part of that is sometimes it's not facts, because you have agents who are because we are you got some
Yep.
interpreting on behalf of the seller, and they're positioning that listing in its glowing light. But the public needs to understand who really understands the real picture here. And so you guys work in a waterfront market. You understand all water is not the same. All docks are not the same. What direction you face on the water makes a difference. There's a lot of things that you can't pull that from the quote facts from the listing. And
right.
what you guys do as counselors and advisors becomes so critical.
I would definitely agree. And that makes me want to have a conversation about the changes in brokerage types that have happened, right? And so Sharon's been with international brokerages, had her own independent brokerage, and now is with a regional boutique. And so while I think there's still the same, you pick your brokerage based on the culture and the resources that you need, whether you're starting out or whether you're seasoned. But we've had the influx of e-buyers and of limited service listings and a lot of virtual platforms that have changed even the dynamic, the inter-office dynamic, right? If we go back to what we were talking about at the beginning, you had to go to the office meeting if you wanted to know what listings were available, right? And now there's kind of not that need. And I know, Jack, you and I have talked about brokerage in that term, but Sharon, I'm curious about your thoughts on some of the disruptor models, if you will, because it relates exactly to what you're saying about the value of our service and the interpretation.
Well, I think there are always going to be room for a lot of different models. Some people are very happy with paying less and getting less services because they can handle that. I think for most people, they really want somebody not only counseling them, but advocating for them. If you're renting a car, if you can talk to somebody about things versus, all you get are endless chains of push 1, push 3.
And then you have to push 9, right? After all that.
Well, the other thing too, when you think about it in the terms of our place in the industry, in terms of luxury home marketing, this is not a cookie cutter type product. And so, we've got luxury homes. Every home is so incredibly different and has so many unique aspects of it that it takes that interpretation that we bring to the table that's so critical, I think. And to try to have, I think, not to say that a limited service brokerage can't accommodate a luxury home. You have to look at what most of our clients want. Most of my clients, most of the folks I've talked to in our market, they're used to everything being full service. They want to be inconvenienced as little as possible. So they want a broker who they can say, here's your job, go. And they can go on, have a great time at the country club, go on trips to Europe, and know that you're handling things day to day and confidently, and they're confident they're having a great time, that you're taking care of business. You can't get that with the limited service brokerage, yet they're, like Sharon said, we're all over the map. There's all sorts of options out there.
Sharon, what do you think the most important thing for you is about the brokerage environment?
I want a broker that is on the forefront of what's coming. Not only, what laws have changed and what the new forms are, but what are we looking for a year or two down the road? And I've been very blessed in my career to have some fantastic brokers who saw what was coming and prepared for it. I don't want to be put in the cookie cutter box. I've spent enough years and enough learning to know what I'm doing, so let me do it. Don't put me in a box. And so I think those are important things.
And don't keep your head in the sand.
One of the things coming up, and I don't know if we're going to get into this, is with the suit that's going on relating to buyer representation.
I was about to ask that very question. Yeah.
I mean, decades ago, I was saying, it would make so much more sense for the seller to have an agent and for the buyer to have an agent. But I think one of the things that still is a huge obstacle is that the lenders don't recognize when the buyer pays the buyer commission, so that they have to come up with that out of their pocket. Now, if you show them it's the same percentage as if the seller was paying it, why do you put it in the loan here and not there? But that's what they do. And if that's affecting the financing and the cash that's needed, that's a big hurdle.
That's unintended consequences of something that may or may not be a reasonable idea. Real estate professionals from other countries are often surprised at how our model works with, in most cases, the seller compensating both sides. And certainly we've seen over the years, as there's been pressure on our professional fee when the market was super hot, that buyer brokerages protected those agents specializing in working directly with buyers on getting their full fee versus whatever was being offered out. So that concept has certainly been explored in making up the difference. It is much easier to manage in the upper tier because it's not a function of financing buying power, but really is interesting. And I know there's some speculation that that people looking for properties may have the inclination to go directly to the listing agent and bypass a buyer's agent so that they don't have to pay that fee. And I don't know whether that's real or whether that is a likely outcome, but it is something certainly to pay attention to.
I think it is for sure. But I think it's interesting. It seems to me that if we keep moving in that direction, we're going to end up in the same place we started 25 to 30 years ago and before, which is where whoever has the listings has the business, and buyer beware. And
yeah,
that's why we have buyer agency to begin with. That's how this evolved to begin with, is basically putting buyer agency in place to protect the consumer. I think in the luxury home market, though, really, and I'll be curious, Sharon, to see what you think about this. I think in the luxury home market that the consumer really appreciates what we bring to the table. They appreciate the counsel and the experience that the typical luxury broker brings to the table. And I think regardless of whether it's a seller paying the fee or buyer paying the fee, I don't think anybody's going to try to figure out how to not pay the fee. They want the service that we provide. And it's interesting. The reason I say that is because right now in our market, for example, there's a lot of pressure at the lower end of the spectrum because our firm is really large. And although I work in a market, it is an inherently luxury home market by virtue of where we are. We have other offices in some of the outlying areas that are not luxury homes, same brand, same company. And those offices oftentimes are dealing with deflating commission levels due to competition. And so your agents who are working the lowest price ranges are often getting some of the lowest commission structures. Right? And agents at the highest end of the price range, where we typically work, are having the highest commission levels. It seems to be it's counterintuitive. But what I think that speaks to is that the consumer at the high end recognizes what we bring to the table, and they want buyer agency. They want listing brokers who are full service, high touch, who understand the dynamics of the industry. They want what we bring to the table. So I don't think I'll be curious to see. I don't think it'll impact our business so much at the upper end. But Sharon, I'm curious, what do you think? If suddenly if sellers were only paying a listing fee and not a buyer brokerage, how do you see that playing out?
I don't see it as getting rid of realtors. I mean, particularly in the luxury end, I can name many situations where there's been a relationship of trust between the agent and buyer or buyer, seller, all the things over the years. And so the client has decided that, instead of buying in Nashville, they're going to buy something in Seattle. But they want to take their agent with them. And you say, but I don't know the Seattle market. It doesn't matter. I want your opinion. I want to know what you think. And, so it may be a commission, but they're certainly going to be paying for your travel and everything else. So they're not penny pinching. They want that counsel, that relationship.
That also makes me think of and reinforces Jack's points about folks in the upper tier in particular having a desire for that level of service that they're willing to pay for. Think about it in how we send referrals, right? We were talking earlier about the importance of networking on a national scale, international, having those real estate professionals that we know and trust to send business to in other areas. So it's no longer about sending business. It's about connecting your clients and your peers with people who they trust to represent them and to be looking out for their interests, as opposed to luck of the draw on whoever happens to have the listing. Those are interesting pieces of food for thought. And I think that I think that those of us that have voices in the real estate space are going to need to make sure that we're sharing those things as things for the public to think about in terms of the value of buyer brokerage, buyer relationships, buyer agency. So that's made me do a little bit of thinking as well.
Well, and I wonder if going to a buyer's brokerage where the client is choosing their buyer's agent and paying for it, there may be more differentiation of, yes, I want my cousin who's had a real estate license for 2 weeks. Well, they're not going to pay as much for that as someone that's got the education and experience. And I think that we look at those things when we are advising our clients with multiple offers coming in. It's also the agent that's a factor.
Yep. That's one of the things that I think is a ramification of how our industry has exploded. There's so many licensees and we've got the limited service models and everything is so electronic. I can think of many times where I've never even met the agent on the other side and I never do, right? We never actually physically meet because we're not even sitting down at the same closing table anymore, right? Somebody's signing remotely on a plane in Seattle and the sellers signed before they moved out last week. And that's really something that I think is a ramification of the advent of technology that limits us in being able to provide that level of service, right? Of knowing who's on the other side of the transaction, understanding their skill sets or where we may need to be prepared for doing a little more work than is necessarily our responsibility. But that just goes back to play into the importance of relationships and service level. I think also having people that you can reach out to, right? That makes me think back to the question about brokerage, right? I heard this phrase and it's not new, but I was reminded of it at the Leaders in Luxury conference, co-opetition, right? In our industry, having those two sides of representation, we are competition, right? We're competing for the same business, but we have to cooperate in order to provide the service and to get the deal done in the best way. And if that were taken out of it, can you imagine how monochromatic, for lack of a better word, a real estate transaction would be?
Yeah.
But going back to classes and conferences in other areas, you learn in a class not only who do you want to refer to, but who you don't want to refer to. And you build relationships. I remember we had a full price offer back when those were unheard of, on a waterfront property, full price. The buyer was from China. And, it was just this unsolicited, haven't seen the house, but I'm offering, you know, full price. And, so I asked the questions that I knew of, and, I asked for a copy of his passport and so on. And he sent it, and it still just seemed a little fishy. So I reached out to a colleague from my early cyber days in Vancouver, who is from Singapore. And I said, here's what I've got. What can you help me with? And he said, well, send me a copy of the passport. So I did. And he immediately called back and he said, no, this doesn't work. Nobody from that area of China would have that series of numbers or letters on their passport. It's obviously a phone.
Interesting.
Where can you get that? Where can you get that knowledge? It's wonderful to have built these relationships year after year. And that's what you get from going to the conferences and staying in touch with people.
Well, yeah, and the longer you've been in the business, the more opportunity you have to develop those relationships. I don't feel like there's a scenario that we can encounter on any day of the week that if I run into something that's new to me, and it's kind of fun to see something new once in a while because
Right.
wow, this is a first for me. There's always somebody I can call as a resource to get help. And oftentimes it's not necessarily somebody within my firm. It's somebody who's actually a competitor of sorts, a colleague from across the aisle, and who I know might have had experience just as you described in a different arena that we can draw from. And that's again something we bring to the table. And the more that we attend conferences and the more that we interact with agents from different agencies, different brokerages, the more opportunity there is to have that kind of synergy, if you will. I love that part of our business.
So as we are getting close to our end, I want to give kind of an open-ended opportunity for Sharon. If you had words of wisdom to give to a new agent today, right? Like think about it. I know you've never wanted to be a broker, right? Even though you were licensed to be a broker, I know that you never wanted that, but you've been an incredible mentor, not just to me, but to dozens. Jack, I was sitting, Mom and I were sitting at a lunch in our brokerage, which is larger than we know everybody. We sat down with a woman that we had not met, and we introduced ourselves, and she her eyes got big, and she said, Sharon Simms. She said, "You're a legend," right? And it was so interesting. But Sharon has given tons of guidance. She's been a great mentor to lots of folks, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but I'd like to know if you had to give some words of wisdom to a new agent today, or somebody who's looking to develop a new niche or move up in price range, what would that be?
Well, I think the first would be if you could find a great mentor, because it's more than just facts. If you can shadow somebody and see how they're thinking and what they do, that's invaluable. I would also say take all the education you can get and go away to get it. Go away to do those things. Take your business seriously. Be there. I mean, I know agents that have lost clients because, well, I have to go home and cook Thanksgiving dinner. Well, yes, but maybe not this minute. And I think that we've seen, because many people leave Florida in the summer, that some agents say, well, I'm taking the summer off because there's no business in the summer. Well, if you don't think there is business, then there isn't. And your actions mean there's no business. But if you think there's going to be business all the time, there is. So don't buy into things that aren't correct. Try new things, explore new things. The industry's always moving. But while you're exploring new things, don't ever abandon your old clients.
The old clients,
Stay
and
in
also, and the tried and true, right? Old school. Think about the handwritten note. Think about picking up the phone and calling somebody to check on them. That is a really good point, and I think that is a wise spot for us to end on, is to think back, and we can get a chuckle about all the changes that have been, the fax machines and all of that. We can get a chuckle about the changes in the industry and where we are, and we can get mired down into paying too much attention to what's around the corner. But those old school tactics and techniques, I think, that personal touch, that Ritz-Carlton service, I think those are great places. Jack, I know that I have enjoyed bantering with Sharon and with you. This is the first time that we've had a guest between us, and I have enjoyed that. And for any of our listeners, I would encourage you, attend a conference, find somebody who's sitting in the lobby or in the lounge, and strike up a conversation with them. And you will hear some great stories, and you might find yourself a mentor. And you can do that all while getting that education and building those referral networks. So
if you do go to the conferences, just as you said, talk to somebody in the lobby. You don't get the value out of leaving 5,000 cards on seats that you're going to get with 2 or 3 people that you have sat down with and developed a relationship with.
Absolutely. What great advice that is.
It sure is. It sure is. That is really good advice. It's about quality, not quantity, right?
Exactly.
All right. So thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of A State of Mind, the art of selling luxury real estate. If you're interested in learning more about the Institute, you can find more at luxuryhomemarketing.com. If you like what you just heard, please share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you've got a hot topic that you'd like us to discuss in a future podcast, feel free to let us know. Send an email to info@luxuryhomemarketing.com. Thanks so much for listening.